Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there. Welcome back, everybody.
So, guys, please do subscribe to both channels, Evolutionary Energy Arts and also on EEARTS. Each one's going to have unique videos. And we're going through like a lot of rabbit holes. I keep jumping in a rabbit hole and then find another rabbit hole. And so what originally happened was Cindy and I were doing a video that was going to be about an hour and 10 minutes long. And everything locked up and we lost it. The file was corrupted. And so we have made two videos so far from that video. But what's happened is it's been a blessing because, we got like 4 other videos lined up. We're going to break it down. And so often we've covered vast amounts of territory in one fell swoop. And sometimes, maybe giving you guys little nibbles is going to be better, and hoping that everybody does go ahead and follows and watches along because, again, we'll recap these things, but I think it's important to categorize. And so we're going to have more, different playlists such as Tartaria, Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria. We're also going to be talking about mud flood. Right now, my thought is that's in this category. And then giants, which might be a totally separate category, probably. But man, the hidden history is just amazing. The more, and here I thought I uncovered most of it. No, I haven't uncovered most of it. There's so much I didn't have a clue about that I'm uncovering right now.
It's that layers of the onion. When you peel back something, you realize there's just another layer. But that's what makes life exciting, and that's what keeps us walking down whatever path that we're on our journey, is knowing that there's always more.
And truly, guys, I want to thank you all for being part of this family and being on this journey. Those that are supporting us over on Patreon. As our newest patrons, we had mentioned William Scott and also Mike and also Phil, and also, just thank you guys for being part of this because, man, we love covering this stuff. And also on Ko-Fi, where you could do a one-time donation or monthly. Do check out evolutionaryenergyarts.com, learn more about us when we're not making videos. As I think we're going to restructure the way we do things and have days where we just knock out nothing but, 20 hours of making videos. Yeah. Just kind of like that, because I find it easy to get a particular focus. So I want to talk about the Great Flood of the Central Valley of California, 1861 to 1862. And, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about a lot of things. California, you got several videos coming up. And then also we're going to go into the New Madrid. And I do think there's a lot that's been hidden, a lot that hasn't been uncovered about what happened when we had the Great New Madrid quake as well. And what hits me as interesting here is this flood, 1861 to 1862, and then the New Madrid quakes. It was 2 years again. And I do feel, oh boy, that we are going to be reliving major scale cataclysms. Not to be a doom and gloomer, guys. It's just what's right ahead. Major earth changes. Yes, there is some technology involved in those. Right ahead. And I mean right ahead. I think in the next couple of years, literally next 2-3 years, we will see stuff that will blow our minds away. But the past has stuff right here in front of us that we could read about. Maybe we don't notice. Maybe we haven't ever heard of it. So this was known as the storm that caused California to go bankrupt. Oh, bankrupt. Key. Again. 1861. What else was happening in this time frame? Well, the Civil War. But of course, the Civil War really didn't manifest so much out in California. It was far away from the battlefields at Gettysburg, etc. Yet again, part of a much bigger scenario that's unfolding on the planet during these timelines. There were major cataclysms, major changes in the middle part of the 1800s. Middle, let's just say the 1800 to 1900. And a lot of things that we can see, such as, what did the Civil War do? Well, it bankrupted the young nation. Bankrupted. What's going on right now? We're all getting bankrupted, with the rising food prices, the rising energy costs. And at the same time, since 2017 in particular, it seems like we've seen floods like we've never seen. And at the same time, we have droughts that are worse than we've ever seen in our modern history, which again, how long does that go? What does it really look like? Cindy's just smiling.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sitting here looking at the very little technology they had back then, yet I can see the technology that's in place now when it comes to controlling the weather and making certain moves. That information has not changed. It's just these people were less aware of the technology that can screw with them, and we are now more aware.
Yes, absolutely. There's always a purpose here that we uncover as we go deeper into these weather disasters. So these storms, called pineapple expresses, are atmospheric rivers where moisture from the Pacific is efficiently pumped in over the West Coast. In this case, tremendous amount of rain was dumped on an area of central California's Central Valley that measured 300 miles long, 20 miles wide. The flood literally bankrupted the state because they were very dependent on property taxes, and 1/4 of the state's taxable real estate was destroyed. 25% of the taxable real estate was destroyed. It was an economic catastrophe. They even moved the capital out of Sacramento for a while. They estimated a similar storm of that magnitude in California today would cause $725 billion in damages. Billion. And, we may see very well something like this or something else, which we have very fascinating videos lined up, especially for those that are curious about California history. Here you have a view of Sacramento City. I mean, look at this. As far as you can see off in the horizon, it's water. It's water. Everybody gets around in boats. I remember when 2017, I started to first joke, part of our survival kit for this time is going to be kayaks and canoes and rowboats and the like. And that really isn't necessarily a joke now.
We have our kayaks now.
We do have kayaks, not that we could fit these big pups in those kayaks with us. We will sink them. Absolutely. Here's a historical photo of this flood. Just amazing to think about what happened. And this is historical. So as we can see, we have this verified. We've talked about mud floods. How often do they happen? How about all these things like this that happen? Because they do happen often. And, this is, again, getting to that bigger picture we were talking about in a previous video, Seattle, and a fire. Well, that buried a city and kind of started it anew, at least a section of it, 12 to 30 feet above the old. Well, here you have water. And this is doing to Sacramento basically a similar thing here, as you see. Water everywhere. And then the indigenous people also talk of this flood too. Oh, and they talk about a lot of things. They also talk about the Great Quake up in Cascadia in 1700 when there was a massive tsunami, and this was probably a 9.0 or greater. Whole villages were swept away. Again, we can see there are massive cataclysms that happen on regular intervals on the planet. Another picture of that massive flood. And here we have a representation of what it probably did to California. Now, Cindy, I think you're more familiar than I am with California as you live there. And you see San Fernando Valley underwater, San Gabriel Valley underwater, and all over here. This is an estimated area that was totally underwater by these storms from 1861 to 1862.
That really blows me away because the amount of built back is huge. And that's really not that much of a history. You would think that people would take a look at that and say, no, 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 I don't think it's a good idea to build here. But it's almost like all of this information has been covered up, washed away, and just everything made anew. But if you see flooding like this in a certain amount of time, I mean, it's a given that it could happen again. I'm just shocked how people rebuilt so much so fast.
Well, the history of California is not what it appears. And, we have another video that'll be up a couple after this one, probably. It's a mind blower. And again, how many of you, just to give a survey, please do share. Did you know about this? Did you know how bad it was? Did you know the extent of this particular flood? Because again, some of us, if we follow the earth changes, we might have heard of it, but never really looked in depth into it. Again, this was massive, massive, massive. And it could happen again. So Sacramento's secret underground harkens back to the Great Flood of 1862 that nearly washed the young city off the map. Many Sacramento residents have heard about the secret underground city that sits below Old Sacramento and parts of downtown, but some have even joined the tours that delve beneath the earth to explore the tunnels and the rough bricked basements of yesteryear. In fact, the Sacramento History Museum conducts those underground tours as a way to educate visitors and preserve our rich and unique heritage. But far less Sacramentans realize why that underground city existed at all, and that they're the last remaining relics of a stormy season that came very close to washing Sacramento completely off the map and rewriting California history forever. So my question is, if you go down another 100 or 200 feet, what do you find? What do you find if you go down a couple hundred more feet, right?
I can see that all over the place, wherever. Look at where you're standing right now. Feel the energy under your feet. The scary thing is that there's so many layers and layers and layers of information, especially if these were built on ley lines. That there's another history right beneath you.
In the autumn days of the gold rush of 1849, Sacramento had established itself as the first major city in California and a thriving transportation and agricultural hub with its position on the Sacramento and American rivers. But the very existence of the city was thrust into jeopardy with the Great Storm of 1861, which is still the largest storm in California history. The historic storm washed out a good portion of California and the Pacific Northwest, turning the Sacramento Valley into a giant inland sea that spanned 250 to 300 miles long, 60 miles wide. Think about that. 250 to 300 miles long, 60 miles wide. I think that's bigger than maybe Delaware. It might be bigger than Rhode Island, or at least as big as those states. The aberrational weather pattern was so huge that it moved as far east as Tennessee, where it shut down troop movements during the Civil War. So the other part of this is that, as I was sharing on a different video, in my research and studies, I've seen that when we have major war events, we have major quote-unquote earth changes, earth catastrophes, disasters, quote-unquote natural disasters. And I wonder if it's, also something that's mostly manufactured, technically, using technology, obviously, or if it's kind of karmic repercussions to a degree, too.
There's so much to consider. And, once you're able to get quiet, you can start allowing that information to come into your field and start dissecting it yourself and get a good feel of what really, really happened. But there's a lot of places that do have karmic situations that need to be righted, and there's certain ways for that to be done.
So, Sacramento bore its brunt, and as the storm began on Christmas Eve of 1861, Christmas Eve of the first year of the Civil War, Sacramento newspapers declared Christmas would be canceled. The heavy rains went on for 45 days, besting Noah's flood by 5 days, right?
Yep.
Straight without break, dropping 400% more rain than usual, causing flooding of biblical proportions that came to a head January of 1862. By that month, the water level had risen so high in the low-lying city of Sacramento that steamships and smaller boats literally sailed through old Sacramento and parts of downtown. Steamboats. Yeah, not just tiny little rowboats. Steamboats going downtown, down to the middle of Main Street, rescuing people from their homes. Old Sacramento was completely submerged. Thousands of residents died in the flooding. Rampant diseases then ensued. When freshly elected Governor Leland Stanford needed to come to Sacramento for his inauguration, he took a rowboat to the steps of the Capitol. Kid you not. Soon, the legislature at the Capitol chose to evacuate Sacramento, temporarily move operations to San Francisco, and residents started following them. Only 13 years old at the time, the city of Sacramento was in serious jeopardy of being abandoned and therefore never evolving into the major metropolitan area we know today. But the plucky and spirited gold rush settlers of Sacramento at the time weren't going to be flooded out of their city without a fight. They knew if they didn't do something drastic to flood-proof their city, California's economic and political power would shift to San Francisco. To rescue their beloved city, the common citizens came to leaders with an ambitious three-pronged plan. They would reroute rivers, reinforce the levees that had been constructed in the 1850s, and do something unprecedented at that time: raise the city's streets. We saw that in Seattle. Residents even agreed to self-tax to make the plan work, but still there were plenty of doubters, and some even considered it foolhardy, including the nation's most famous writer at the time, Mark Twain. The system of raising its buildings has its advantages, Mark Twain wrote. It makes the floor shady and is something that is great in such a warm climate. It also enables the inquiring stranger to rest his elbows on the second-story windows and look in and criticize the bedroom arrangements of all the citizens. Again, when we've seen all these pictures of, all these submerged cities, we see a trend that starts to emerge here, in Seattle and San Francisco, of which we understand the historic, obvious facts.
I don't see this getting covered in regular public schools. And I think it should be, because it's important. It's so important.
Did you have any kids go and grow up in California public schools?
Not exactly. Now, Emma, I did homeschool her, and I didn't see any of this information come through. However, it was interesting when we were looking into some information about Native Americans. I did learn about how they made the ghost dancing illegal, or our government had made that illegal. I was surprised, but really happy to see that they put those things in public schools. I just don't think we're inundated with enough of the right information that's pertinent to how we live and how we grow up and how we build.
So, the monumental feat of engineering preceded Old Sacramento, and some buildings in the current downtown, roughly between I and N streets bordering Sacramento River, were raised about 9 to 10 feet. One by one, workers cut through the foundations of houses, stores, and buildings, then used a lattice of logs and hand-cranked house jacks, a lot of manpower, to raise the structures. The 9-foot gaps that were created between the old ground level and the new were filled with mud and sand. Other business owners found it easier just to leave their ground level be, seal it off, and build a new ground level or another story on top of it. This is exactly what we see all around the world. Facing the colossal expense and workload, other store owners couldn't come up with the needed resources and had to close their doors and walk away. One Chinese herbalist did nothing, and his once street-level store was in the basement, but he kept doing business from the basement. In all, it took 15 years to finish the street raising as well as reinforcing the levees. When the dust settled, Sacramento was indeed livable again, saving the city but also creating plenty of unique structures beneath the earth. sometimes called hollow sidewalks, including tunnels, cellars, bricked up former storefronts, other subterranean spaces. Sacramento was the first city on the West Coast to raise its streets, predating Seattle's similar architecture endeavor by 30 years. It became a rich and entertaining part of its history, with plenty of rumors of ghosts and paranormal activity underground over the decades, as well as a lot of illegal booze being served down there during Prohibition. You can still explore the history of Old Sacramento, the early city, and the underground city with information and tours from the Sacramento History Museum. So, there you go. And what if this type of thing is happening all the time, all over the world, in different spots, just on a regular basis? And as different areas are the results of these atmospheric rivers here, mysterious, the Chicago fire. We've covered, did we cover that together? Or I remember covering that because, do you know the Chicago fire? There were reports of UFO sightings.
Oh, I believe it, though.
Yeah, there was mysterious UFO sightings. Again, our history is staring us in the face. There's a lot of things that are very, very perplexing. But, again, some stuff is right there. So that gives you an explanation. So, again, what if this is always just an ongoing thing? We think of the harps that angels don't play. And we could look back historically to the dating of when, that was put in place up in Alaska, and there's more than one. But what about the ones we don't see? What about things like, again, the white night satellite, the black night satellite? We know there's things in orbit that, there's no way Homo sapiens put them up there. Who put them up there? And again, what's really going on? It's part of the unveiling. So, this is out of Fox Weather. What's a Pineapple Express? Well, it's when there's this system that comes into place and it doesn't move. And again, think in terms of frequency, vibration, signals. There's technologies that could induce this. Absolutely. They could just basically steer. And we've seen BP Earthwatch. I remember watching his coverage of Hurricane Harvey. You can see he showed where it looked like something was literally shot from Mexico. And all of a sudden, Harvey just changes course and goes straight inland and stops. We saw, was it Florence? I think Hurricane Florence in the Carolinas going at 1 mile an hour. We've never seen a hurricane move at 1 mile an hour. Yeah, there's a lot of technology out there. This Pineapple Express, again, they're always giving us new terms. I think all this has been in place for a very, very long time, well before the official explanations. What do you guys think? Please do share your thoughts.
Indeed. Please share. We're curious.
And as always, guys, much love. Stay prepared. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.